So in this video, we're going to show you how to edit the steps and add fields into them in your process. So here we'll find our process that we created earlier, the test process. Now we'll click into that and you'll see we've got our few entries from before. What we'll do is up-issue this process where we can now edit the entries. Something to do if you aren't quite sure how your process will turn out, or maybe if it's your very first time creating a process, you might want to turn on test mode. Test mode allows you to edit and make changes to your process while also filling it out and testing the data without actually keeping a hard copy storage on the system. So if we turn on test mode, we can make lots of changes and come back to it at the end without having to always explain a reason for why we up-issue the process at every stage. So now the test mode is on, we'll go back into our versions, we'll click up-issue, and we'll be taken into our edit mode. Now, as we said before, or from our first video, we didn't have any fields, so we'll go to step 1 and we'll start to add some fields. Now, if this is the first time you've used the field function, then we'll explain what those look like and how they work in some detail. But if you have previously used fields, you might want to fast forward this a little bit. So adding a field, you simply click the left button there, as you see, and then you have what we call a field box. So the field is asking you to add a field title. So that title can be a statement, a question, very much the same like your process step title. But here is where you want your users to add data. So if this was details, then we might want our user to add their name. We might want another field and want them to put a date in. We may even ask for a third field, and in this one, we might want them to upload a file. So these are our field descriptions. Now we want to select the type of data that we want our user to enter. So where you can see it says pick a type, we can click that, which then brings up the different field types that you have. So each of these field types serves a different type of data you'd like to capture. We have inputs. So inputs are things like text, text area if you want maybe a larger paragraph, and then some standard items where you can have conditional formatting, so a phone number, ensuring that there's 11 digits. An email makes sure that the user puts an @ symbol and the email is legitimate. A number field allows you to enter numbers. There are some caveats around that, in that if you want numbers and letters, we would suggest using the text or text area field. Number fields will only allow you to add numbers. A date field allows you to pick from our date picker, and likewise a time field allows you to pick from our time picker. Both of these will default to the exact time or date whenever the user fills out that field. The date and time allows you to pick both at the same time. A signature field allows you to use your cursor to sign off a specific box. The table field we will come back to in a lot more detail in a separate video, and then a people field as well we'll talk about later. There are other fields, but for this video we won't go through them in too much detail. Media is obviously quite self-explanatory. Image, if you want to only upload images. If you potentially want to upload files and images, then you want to select the file option. And then our selector, which is Dropbox, Tickbox, some weighted lists, which we'll cover in more detail, as well as status, user, and dataset. The logic fields too can be quite complex, so we'll cover those in another video. So for this video, we're going to want to upload a file. So we want to click File. You'll see that is here. Unfortunately, we've set it against the wrong field type. So what we'll do is just change that. So a name, we have two options. We could pick a text, or we could even pick a user, which allows us to select from the drop-down for all our users in the business. For this one, let's click User. Date, we'll pick a date field. And then File, we're going to pick a file field, as we explained. So these are our field options. Next, you can see we've got an option here to pick from global. This is a little bit more of a complex field, so we'll talk about that in its own video. Text is if you would like to provide instructions for the user. So if we add text, we can here provide info for the user. There's lots of things we can do for this field, for example, making it bold, underlined. We can even change the font color as applicable. So feel free to manipulate those settings as you wish. Once we're happy, we click Done, and that then becomes available text to provide instructions to our user. Every field that we add can be dragged and dropped into location. So you'll see as soon as I move the cursor up a little bit towards the edge of the field, it changes to a hand symbol. By clicking down and holding, we can move this to an alternative position and replace it wherever we want. And same with the fields, they work in the same way. Now, that was a text field. An info field is very similar in that it allows text next to an image. So here we'll put text next to an image. When we're happy with the text, we can click Done. And we can also upload images that are going to be used next to our image. So here you can see if we upload an image, it's going to show it next to that. And we can upload multiple images. And when the user sees this box, they'll be able to cycle through these images as well as see text next to them. If we want their user to duplicate this field, in effect creating their own text info field, then you would want to tick this box. But we'll show you what that looks like by ticking it in a moment. We can also give it a title. So here we'll call this maybe a standard info box. We'll just do as a title. You can see our text box also has a title, but these are not mandatory. So it's only if you require them to have a title. Put a title in there to show you. So next we have a form button. Now if you've generated forms, you can simply click on this button. You can select from a drop down of your forms. In this demo, we haven't created any forms, so this will just say loading until we've got forms located. So we'll show you how to do that in another video, but not at this time. So to delete any field, you'll see a little red bin icon, and once you click that, it will simply disappear. Following on from this, we have a read and understood task. This allows you to link any documents within your doc library and make them read and understood tasks. So if we select an image, what this is going to do is allow the user to click that button and confirm they've read and understood whatever the information is inside of that box. So we'll show you how that works in a moment. The table field allows you to create a table. So here we'll call this test table, and we're going to edit that. And here we are able to add rows and columns into the table. So we can also import from Excel if you already have a predefined set of data. But to create from scratch, you'll see we have these small question marks. Those allow us to select our column type. So again, we have our field types. So if we want it just to be text, we can select text. We can give it a heading. And here we can choose a second column type, which maybe we want a date. We can put date. Here we might want to upload a file again. With file. Now, if we want this table to appear so that the user adds information without anything pre-populated, then that would be as far as we would go. We would simply click done, and that would save that table in there. Anytime we want to edit the table or to edit something, you'll see if there's a pencil icon, we're able to edit it. So clicking on that, it brings us back to our table to make any necessary changes. If we wanted predefined information, then we may add some rows, and here we might pick information. So we might ask, what date did you do something? And this we might do if we wanted the user to have some instructions, and from those instructions put a date and upload a file in. But we might allow them to now add multiple ones of those, and we'll show you how that works when created. So we'll click done, and we'll come back to that in a minute. The resources field allows you to add a permanent resource to this step. So this might be true if you would like a policy that always applies to this step, or maybe you were carrying out an SOP and you had drawings on there. You may want to upload a drawing that's always linked to this step. That is how you would use that process. So we'll add a resource here. We're going to drag and drop something, and we're just going to call this our samples instruction document. So once that document uploads, that will now become a permanent resource available for this step. So that's about it. We may have missed the task one, so we'll come back to that. A task is just a simple task button that doesn't link to any specific tasks, but allows the user to just confirm that they've completed an action. So we'll show you what that looks like. Now, at the end of most of the fields, you'll see there are some additional options. On this task button, you say we can have more details. If we click on that, it opens us a box to give the task more information. So here we'll just say more info for the task. And you'll see we have our standard text box that you can modify and make text bold, etc. You can also upload files, which may be useful for providing instruction. When we're happy, we click the green, and then we click done. The symbol you may see in a lot of fields is make required. So this ensures that the step cannot be completed without that field being completed. So here we toggle that on by simply clicking and unclicking to remove it. You may want fields such as file uploads to be mandatory. So in this case, let's make that required up here. Following that, you have a duplicate option, and you'll see this appears on a number of fields, which simply allows you to make a complete copy of the previous field you just created. And then the bin icon, which allows you to delete that field. There are a number of other options on fields, which you'll see as we scroll to the top. Two that you'll want to take note of is the hide show and the help text field. Hide show is a logic that allows you to show or hide a field based on other fields within your step. So for example, if we had a date, once the date is filled out, we might want this name field to appear. But if the date isn't filled out, we might want the name field to not show. So what we would do is select our hide show, and you can see we're given options. So this field will be shown, or we can say when the date field is today, for example, or is past the date. So you can see certain options come up, and that will change depending on the type of field that you select. So if we select the table field and we go show, and we now select name, you'll see it says when the user is anyone or when the user is Ewan. So just some logic that you can select depending on your field. Feel free to try these and you'll see how you can work them in your own use case. We did talk about the help text. So this is simply to add information. So upload a file. Please ensure file is clear and latest version, for example. And then we'll show you how that appears on a page when using the process. And you click Done to close. If we had created some logic, so for example, shown date is today, you'll see that the icon now is colored. That ensures that you're aware that there is hide show logic applicable on that field. To get into it at any time, simply click the button. And to remove that, simply click the delete button in the bottom left-hand corner. And you'll see that now is back to normal. So that completes our fields overview. The asset incident, the forms and the pick from global we'll cover in a separate video. Something to be mindful of, each process can be given a time for it to be completed. And you'll see this in the top right-hand corner where it says step time. Clicking on that allows you to set a time for the step. Here you can see we can give it 1 day. So maybe that's what we want to select for this first step. We'll click Done and we'll save that and move on. Step 2 might be different, however. We might want step 2 to be set for a day in general, but we might want to also allow the user to select the time for when they want to complete step 2. So by toggling that on, we'll show you how that looks when using the process in a second. Now at the bottom of each process, if we go back to our first step, at the bottom of each process step, you have the options. So we already discussed the next step options. So that automatically gets configured when you toggle the little buttons and link them together. But you also have an automatically send on option. So to automatically send on, you simply toggle the button on. This ensures that the next step in the process is automatically routed to whichever users you decide to be included. So if we clicked all 3 and click Done, you'll see this now adds them to the send on options. What we can do is ask the user to pick from that list. That will mean that the user will select one of those 3 people. If we toggle that off, it means the task will automatically go to all 3 of those people. What we can opt is also to close the process when the step is completed. So if we don't want our user or our user isn't involved in the next step, we may want them just to complete that process and close it so that they can carry on and not get confused about worrying that the next step is open and not completed. So we'll show you how that works next. Below that, you have notifications, actions, and approvals. So if we wanted this step to go for approval prior to going to the next step, we would simply tick the approval section. And here we would toggle that on, select our user for approval, select how many users, so if just one, at least one. Maybe if we had multiple, we could say if at least one user approves that step, then it will go on to the next step. So we'll toggle that on and leave that as is. Actions allow you to trigger actions at the end of the process or even when started. So you'll see there is a new action. So when this step is started, I want to send a task. So we can then add a task and send a task to specific users or the current user whenever this occurs. So this can come in handy, especially where you have decision steps and maybe you're routing different actions depending on the decisions made. The notifications work similar in that you decide the user and then you decide what type of notification, whether it's just a notification or notification and email, is sent if the step becomes overdue, for example, started or completed. So again, for escalations, you would decide send a notification and email when the step is overdue. And if we click Done, that will now be our first notification. And we can add as many notifications as we'd like. So we've set up approvals. We don't have any actions, but we do have a notification, and that's what we'll test next. So let's save that. We'll now click Save of our process, and that brings us back into the process overview. Now, because we're in test mode, you'll notice that we're still on version 1. If we click versions, you'll see again, we're still in version 1, but we're on test, version 1.1 test. And that will allow us to keep making changes without having to explain what we've changed or why we've changed it. If we start our process, you can see now all our fields that we've just created are ready and available to be used. So we have our text field, we have a file field, our date picker, and you can see if we pick a date, it's automatically going to default to the right date. Likewise, if we use that user function, the user field, we now get to pick from our users. And if we scroll down, we can see our other fields there. So we do have this field where we added information in the info box. You can see we can click on that. If we had multiple fields, we could toggle or scroll through them. We can also add another one of these because we set on that information. So this will allow us to type in different information upload another image, and so on and so forth. So these can now be added because of that option that we selected. Next, you'll see our read and understood. So clicking on that, it takes us to our image, and now it will require that we confirm and we sign off that document to say that we've read and understood it, and we can complete that task, and that will now go green and save in there. Our table field, you can see we've got our option that we wrote, so we had the standard text. We can pick our date, we can add our fields, our files, but we also always have an option to add more rows in any table field as well. So that's why we said if you want text pre-filled, then you would write that when building it. If you didn't, you would leave it blank. Our resource, you can see we've permanently got that resource that's available. So at all times, we can select it by clicking the PDF. That will open up the document. We can have a look through that document. And if we close that, we can then come back to the process and continue onwards. Then the task button, as we said, is just a simple task status button. So we can say whatever task that was that we should have done, we can click complete, and that allows us to carry on. So as we said, the upload file field was mandatory. We also had our instructions, which if we hover over, you can see it tells us what there is to do. If we tried to complete this, it's not going to allow us because the upload a file field is required. So until we actually attach something, which we'll do now, it won't allow us to continue forward. So now that we've attached it, we can submit for approval. Just before submitting for approval, we'll just come back up here and you'll see that this has given us our next date and time. So due the 10th of June at 10:59. So that was based on that one day that we had set when we built the process. So now we're happy, so we're going to submit for approval. And you'll see it brings up our 3 users who we can decide from to approve. So in this case, we're going to select Ewan, click done. Because we're logged in as Ewan, we can approve that. We must write a comment whenever we approve, and we can then move it on, and that will save the process. Because we're logged in as Ewan, we need to just refresh that page, but otherwise we will be able to carry on if it was another user that we defined. So here now you'll see there's a button that allows us to complete the step. If we simply select that, we can move forward, and that's kicked us out because now we know the next step is to be carried out by different people. So if we go into step 2, we'll see this is assigned to Ewan, Ethan and Matt, and it's for them to carry out that next step. So hopefully that makes sense as to the fields and how they work and are added into your process. Look forward to seeing how you create them in the future.